Okay, so Master Mason note coming at you. Day two over to Tompkins. Running their manual dragon. A couple times I've done this one before. Same deal, same monster essentially, different breed. Uh, yeah, location, not breed. Anyway, at any rate, I want to be careful. Of course, I just always want to be careful coming in new. You're on probation always. That means like doesn't matter. You know how to do something. They know how to do something. If there's communication time, and that's time on time. That's time on time. You gotta play that ball. You don't want any hit to come up. Everything is 83 on the ASVAB or better. Everything. It comes down to little plays farther down the line and how much you want to miss out front and down on the back end via experience, of course. The ball and oil and ball and water situation, if you will. I'm not saying you figure out the floor foundation. Sometimes it takes you a while if they let you just crash around in it. So you can get a pro tip. This torch, this line, lots of guys, speed dynamics. Yeah, you want to pick up on that every time up top. Every one of them's going to break, like every one of them. And so I'm thinking about that stuff when I'm working my stack. How do I want to, because of that experience, how do I want to take that overhead and deal with it different? Hopefully I can find a lot of the common problems that anybody would have faced. And some of them are mechanical, right out on the rail. Always, anything with a rail, named rail, that's going to be a sketchy place. Trip hazard, line hazard, blow up hazard, kick out hose hazards. I'm not too worried about that stuff. There's lines and air cranes and stuff, but that means always out of the way. Those things can 90 degrees. Well, you got to do the math. 18 pounds is either inch and a half or 2 inch. Whatever the deal may be. Drop 5 feet is going to cut a hose in half. I know. I come, as far as the noise levels and anything like that concerned, you're used to it because you don't care. You've been in enough machinery in general that's all loud and crazy that you stop. I'm not saying you need it. You got to wear ear protection, but you got to be able to do that. I wish I was younger. I would have put more care into my ear protection and things like that around some of that stuff, working the tracer cells. I think about it now and I take it a lot more seriously. I got a few bad habits still, but and all the ways one of those things can get you. Complacency is probably always the one that does anyway. So, and I think that's what breeds into a lot of the motivation, especially what I'm trying to bring to the card lately. As far as what those guys, they don't need it. And you got to understand, a lot of the places have a lot of younger guys in there. It was that kind of set and saws. And I had prior from that. With a lot of that old, it's a nice thing about our range in the Millennium gauge there. It's a nice little crossover, especially in a little pocket like these areas are. For you have to, because the money on the bone. If this is not mains on TV, double dealing or dealing with contracts or time or pushing some things, where did that money go? That's always the number, and it follows very specific timelines and does things. And again, so I want to do this. I do this for whatever boxes may be out there that this is relative to for the shit I've kicked up. And also, so from a review standard of any review, but also in these kind of avatar, I'm here. This was kind of that method. Working those are not fundamental new things to me. Working with the guys is always kind of one of those new things for me, but I try to avoid it. I don't like to get too much in the pocket, and that's what's real good about having that kind of motivation while you're dedicated to what function you're doing. The beauty about quantum mechanics is when you're an OP, you always get shit. A lot of places, I've damn near been fired out the front for being too hard. They don't fire you. They're just concerned about how hard you're working via the end result on the timeline. A lot of that result, and that's going to make a lot of physics along with safety. Now, safety is the first priority, but beyond that, later on, when that gauge is out on the far side, it's good to get skilled, and you got to out front. You know, for me, this I should be able to do it, but it really depends on Sawyers and order putouts and things, and floor setup for that position, who's doing what and why on the crossover, because they certainly could. And you could ramp those bastards off to 12 if you really wanted to, but you have to have the reason to do really anything above what that RPM is, because those are your limits. And it's good to have good averages by tanks and square footages, and it's real clean to do it. You know the outputs on a thing. Hopefully the guy grading on the front side there via operation. Again, I would do things differently from different angles of the universe there myself, so I can't necessarily explain to you why some operations are done for some people this way and other operations done for some people this way. I'm the kind of person that looks at a skid steer and says, honestly, that rating capacity has done a certain thing. When I go to call anybody, any of the big hits, I want to be in on that. I want to start rating that serviceability for that equipment to make sure it's cool. I want to be able to have this piece of equipment with somebody who's going to say, when you go to buy this, can I buy that with that equipment? Is this something that I can attach to this instead of the company's private R&D team, and how we're compensating what the fair value on something like that is, plus an output on work in an educational safe place to do something of those natures. I mean, if you teach it, then it's an educational standard. So you got safety reports, thermal and rock face and yard work, bluestone, I mean, whatever you want, those are all analyzations. Those just become the form, the grid, the problem, all right, you do this, and it doesn't matter. I mean, little old ladies have problems with time and money on their house fixing, if they're, you know, whatever the daily job. So what do? You buy in. And that becomes the compensation for this grid. But I'm not saying she couldn't engineer the hell out of that thing into tapping the hammer every time, or over time, given that situation, those kind of infinities over some of the space-time numbers that I like to provide for this. What is the measurement of F? All right, you know, just because I want to kick it loose, why buy bluestone in the torch? Rock face, chisel, saw, any kind of matter. Could you determine a gravitational wave of that company if you took the constants and just balled them? Because these are all globular states. It sits on the floor. If it's around a planet and it's little, if the order's a little like this because of, no, obviously the rock, it's a rock. It's made of this. It's flying by those numbers. Maybe this was that, and I'm sure on the floor some of that stuff is about, you know, maybe it's not totally what I think it is, but then you get up on it and it's like, well, there's that. And you've observed it through the telescope, and, you know, if you're not looking right at it, the telescope is just the constants change over to a calculus form, A, B, N1. I know. So torch, you know, hoses, their lines, everything like that, do their morning rotation, make sure that that's bucked off, zeros are zeros, 30s, 90s, and 60s, 80s or 40s, and everything's like that's what it's supposed to be. Yeah, and then after that, it's, I've been poking around at their grade. It's tough. It's a two-part problem. You can't jump on somebody else's saw, and it really depends on what the rock's doing, how long it's been doing it, how deep into the order are you. Can you set that shit out? That's a space problem, you know, and it just becomes time. Time becomes matter, and you spaghettified. They always push you to go to that way, and then that's the motivation on that. That's like, I'm not in the boss hub, you know. I'm just hammering down numbers. I'm just bringing it to my simulator while I'm up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, and those are real tight ones. 24s, 18, 24 is all right, but you get a little bored sitting there. But set up turnover, check reads on every one of them, and it's a constant process. So you're always in a direct physics that really makes it a kind of cool thing. Up, down, right. And I mean, every move in a tight little spot like that is really nice. The floor is always clean, no rock on them. I'm dry, fairly dry anyway. Close. That's a big one. No, when you're 18 and in the yard, and you get the VIP treatment. Standard old Joe, up top, burning in their 11.6, pulling out, pull and go, in their arc shop, hand honing, lips. Pattern saw, back roll pattern, 1x1 saw, recut stuff, junk down. Now, seen the tread shop, kind of looked at that around. I did work up actually at that one table once. They let me have one of them on an angle. It was first cut I ever did with saws. You got to cut a 5-sided rectangle. It's got a nice slant on it. Do some treads. I popped the top out of the Devonian saw. That was the first thing I did. I was like, dude, I touched the nut on the bottom of this. Send it. Okay. I'm sure. Send it. All right. A month later. Luckily, they had it run down. He had it down so I could run the table and do it. And I had my one set up with it anyways. I don't know if he was gonna. I'm still hopping in and out, tread the shop, saws, unloading, burning blocks. Oh, cleaning bays with the skid steer. Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, generally they didn't let me do much of the gas tank stuff, propane tank, anything. I mean, I filled propane tank. Fill up you got numbers. I got to write down somewhere. Make sure the lever is down. Alright, so good. I don't want to get too off topic on here. It's just because that's the breathing for me. I sleep. That's how I dream at night, I assume. Because I wake up, it's just normal. Yeah, breaking edges. I like the grinder method. It depends on how you like it. It depends on what you are allowed to do. Because can is always an option. It does. However, if number is added to a different value based on the system, then that does as well. And you have to factor. And that's all I can say about everything. Every time there's a problem, every time. Catch you on the next one.